Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. This episode is brought to you by CyberLynx.com, CyberLynx.com. CyberLynx is a complete technology solution provider that ensures your business has the most reliable and professional IT service and the only company that guarantees your safety and satisfaction. We help protect you from cyber attacks, hardware failures, and technology-induced headaches. The bottom line is we provide all the services you need to be safe, productive, and profitable. From Chief Information Officer services to IT help desk services, we got you covered. And we do it without requiring a long-term contract because we believe in earning your business every day. Listen, Chad, I'll introduce Chad in a second, but Chad, we had a client that came to us after being hit by ransomware twice. It was incredibly costly for them, and it almost cost them their business. Their IT provider had left them completely vulnerable to attack, and they paid the ransom. And a couple months later, they came back and got hit again the exact same way. Their IT provider simply wasn't equipped to protect them properly. We got called in. We found the vulnerability right away, cleared it up, got them covered under our protection plan, and they've been safe ever since. That was over 5 years ago, and that's what we do for clients, and we're happy to have them on board and keep them protected. To learn more, you can visit cyberlynx.com or email us at help@cyberlynx.com or give us a call at 202-996-6600. So I have Chad Franzen here of Rise25, who's done hundreds of interviews with successful entrepreneurs, investors, and CEOs. And we've flipped the script today, and he'll be interviewing me. Welcome, Chad.
Hey, Matt, thanks so much. Great to be here. Hey, I'm looking forward to talking with you today. We've got all kinds of things that we're going to cover. Why don't we start out with the dark web? My knowledge of the dark web is basically that it exists and that it's apparently a scary place. Tell me, what is the dark web?
Sure. So the dark web is a scary place, if you will. But the reality is, the web that is, you go onto Google and you can search anything. So it's the web because it's indexed and it's all related, right? Well, the dark web is the exact opposite. It is not indexed. It's not something you can just go to that web page and get answers for. So what makes it kind of scary is that in that sort of unindexed, not connected way, it gives people anonymity. It gives them the ability to do, anything that they don't want the world to know about. That doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but it oftentimes is. So, and to get to the dark web, you don't just do it through your browser. You don't just open up Google Chrome or Internet Explorer or whatever and go to google.com. You have to get onto a special network called the Onion network, using a special browser called the Tor browser. And then you can access these sites if you know where they're located. So yeah, does that make sense? That's what the dark web is in essence.
So, when you describe that, how is that? How can that be bad?
Right. So, it can be bad in that world, it becomes very easy to be completely anonymous and not be tied to your real identity. So whenever that happens, people, can take advantage of that and do illegal things. You can sell people's information, stolen credit cards, drugs, you name it. If it can be sold, and if it's not, something you're going to find it at Sears, which, well, I guess you're not going to find anything at Sears now, right? But if you're not going to find it on Amazon.com, it's not, that dark web's a place to look for all your illegal activities. Yeah.
So CyberLynx does a dark web assessment for your clients. What does that look like? What does that involve?
Yeah. So basically, we scan the dark web for any information about your company, your employees, email addresses, domain name. So this way, if the big advantage here is not to see if any of your employees are on the dark web doing nefarious things, because, well, we wouldn't know. But it's really to go and find out what information is on the dark web about you or your business. So if, let's say, for instance, you were part of a data breach, then that information is, when it's on the dark web, it's actively being sold to other people. So your email passwords, a lot of times people use the same password over and over. So, or some variation. So the real challenge becomes that if and when you do those things and those passwords were breached because, let's say, they were part of the Audi breach or Target or you name it, there've been hundreds of big breaches now. So if your password that you used at Target is the same password you use on other sites, now you've given the bad guys one of your default passwords, if you will, right? So then they use that to guess your email or some variations, but you've given them a real kind of head start into breaking into your company. And then once they've breached, the real the thing that you really want to protect is your email, because once they've got access to your email, they can reset most other passwords, right? So they can access all kinds of things. You name it, most of your portals, all your online stuff. It's, oh, I forgot my password. Comes to you and you do the password reset through your email. So, and then on top of that, there have been lots of cases where because of that information that's available, once they've got access to your email address, they can easily then inject themselves into conversations. So we had a law firm. Sorry, one sec. We had a law firm come to us because they were a part of this I guess breach hack attempt where, in the midst of a wire transaction for hundreds of thousands of dollars, the bad guys had compromised some the recipient's email address. It was just their personal email address. And so they just lucked out in this particular case. And they're like, wow, this is great. They're about to be, wired hundreds of thousands of dollars for the sale of this, I believe it was a house, right? And so what they did was they emailed the law firm and said, hey, here's the routing, here's the banking information, send it here. Sure enough, off it went, hundreds of thousands of dollars gone, because as soon as that lands, you move it off. And if you do that fast enough, there's no getting it back. And so that's, a huge payoff for hackers. And there's a lot of things that we can do to help protect that. Obviously, we can't protect every residential client, but on the law firm side, when they can see that, hey, wait, this is not quite right, or this email address is slightly different, then they get alerts for that. So yeah. So in that particular case, that person's information was on the dark web. That's how they got access to that email account. And so, so this bleeds into other things where it's not just a matter of having good passwords, but you've got to have good kind of cyber hygiene, if you will. So you can't just have good passwords. You got to also have multi-factor authentication set up on your email so that when you go to log in from, Timbuktu, it's like, wait a second, is this really you? And then that gets stopped. So I don't know if that answers your question. But.
Yeah, it definitely does. So you guys, you do a dark web assessment. Let's say you're working with a client and you do a dark web assessment for them, and you found that they have some information is out there on the dark web that's dangerous. That's dangerous for other people to have. What then would a client do upon receiving that information?
Sure. So what we advise is to say, hey, look, we'll do their entire business, scan it, and be like, look, if Bob is, let's say, this employee Bob had a bunch of passwords compromised, or even if it was just one, then we say, look, that's totally fine. I mean, you can't stop those compromises. So it's out there, great. What it is. But what's important is to know what's out there so that you can make sure that that Bob isn't using that password anymore on anything. So that's the real advantage. So know what's out there so that you can combat it. And it's as simple as just changing your passwords, knowing that those were compromised. Oh, whoops, and changing them. Because the passwords are a funny thing, because while there's a cure for it, there's an easy solution, and that's a password manager. The challenge is getting people to use those password managers, because it'll take them an hour or two to set that up. And it's like, unless you're a geek like me who just loves, the technology and loves doing it, that's a pain in the butt. You'd much rather just keep writing it down, keep using the same default passwords, and keep doing that, keep saving it in your browser, which turns out is a horrible idea because they're super easy to get. So it's really hard to get people to move over to those password managers unless they've had a compromise. So the best thing that we found to kind of cure that is to say, look, use good passwords. Some people do, some people don't. But with that dark web scan, we can really give them an extra layer of protection, in that we know they're not using the password manager. We can't get them to, but here are all the compromised passwords. Don't use those, right? If nothing else, change them over. And let's use multi-factor authentication on everything, so that when you go to log in from a new location, you got to have that, you get that code on your phone, so that you're really protected. So between those things, it's a really nice balance to keep people protected without having to force them into doing the right thing all the time, because they really just want to do their job. They don't want to, spend hours on setting up a password manager. So.
Sure. So let's pivot a little bit from the dark web to cybersecurity. I'm sure all these things are related a little bit, but tell me a little bit, kind of your definition of cybersecurity and what that is.
Sure. So cybersecurity is actually a process. It's not a state of being. So you can't achieve cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is the process of securing all of your technology, right? All of your data. And that is a kind of a moving target. As Windows or your Mac or any device that's connected to the internet, they're constantly getting updated, or at least they should be. And that's all part of it. If things are outdated, the reason that you want to keep your phones and your computers up to date, really to the minute. The second an update comes out, get it. It used to be that, hey, we can wait. Let's let everybody else test out this update, and then we'll find out if it's got problems. That was very common practice for a long time. And the problem with that is now the bad guys, they don't have to be searching for you in particular. What they do is they search for a particular vulnerability, and they're not manually doing this either. They've programmed a bot to run out on the internet and check every single IP address for this particular vulnerability. So if you haven't updated your phone, you haven't updated your computer, your router, your firewall, if those aren't updated, as quickly as possible, as soon as those vulnerabilities are found, the bad guys are writing, a robot, a bot to go out and find this so they can exploit it quickly. So there's a window of opportunity for them that is closing the second, it's found out. And sometimes the bad guys wait for that to be released, that solution, and because they didn't know, they're like, oh, that was it. Okay, cool. And then they start writing it because they know that people aren't going to update their stuff right away. And so that gives them time to get it done. So part of cybersecurity is battening down the hatches, right? Getting everything as secure as possible. And kind of the problem with security is that as you get more secure, you give up convenience. And so what we do is we work to have that balance of, our focus is always, how do we keep our clients protected? Because unlike a lot of places, we offer 100% ransomware free guarantee. We absolutely guarantee it. There's following our under our plans, you can't get infected with ransomware or a virus or any other malware. But at the same time, you don't want to be working in a closed off box that's not connected to the internet, because they used to say that was the only way that you could be free from viruses, was to be not connected to the internet, or basically, your computer unplugged. Well, we've come a long way since then. And I think well, I know that it's very doable to have a your entire company completely secure. And that becomes a lot harder when so you hear me say this and you're like, wait a second, how's that possible when we know that companies with tons of money like Target and Audi, and I'll keep beating those guys up right throughout the show, but because they were such major breaches, and you wonder, well, when they've got all the money, in the world, and they're spending tons on cybersecurity. How is it they got hit? And now I'm saying that your small business and that I can protect you, I can guarantee that protection. How's that even possible? Right. Well, I'll tell you, when you're a big company, you've got a big surface, attack, area, right? It's huge. You've got all of this area to cover to keep protected. And it becomes very difficult because you've got employees moving in and out, systems changing, all these things. It only takes one screw up, to let the bad guys in. Now, imagine in stark contrast, you've got a small business with, let's say, 50 employees versus 50,000. They are all work in one office or they all work from home, right? You've got 50, 100 devices to secure. You've got a lot less going on. Your attack sector is so much smaller. The area that they can actually work to penetrate is so much smaller than it is for a large, organization. So it's a lot easier to protect the little guys than the big guys. So I wouldn't even want to be in that business of protecting the big guys because it's a nightmare and you can't guarantee success. So for me, it's like, yeah, I get it. You're fighting the good fight and more power to them. But I like fighting the good fight and actually winning. So, for the little guys, they get breached and it can be game over. The ransom alone can cost them their entire business. So what I really like about protecting the little guy is that you're really saving jobs. Like I think in the intro, I talked about that client that got hit twice. It was they just barely made it through. It was very, very costly. Their insurance wouldn't cover it. And because of how they were protected, it was, and it was a shame, and it almost cost them their business. And so doing stuff like this where we can use proper cyber hygiene and cyber hygiene and cybersecurity kind of go hand in hand. Cyber hygiene being kind of like how you do it, cybersecurity being the kind of overall process of keeping everything clean. So long answer to your question of what is cybersecurity, although this could go on we could talk for days about what is cybersecurity and how do you implement it. But yeah, that's what it is.
So let's talk a little bit about that cyber hygiene. I've got a number of things I could ask. So for people who hear you say you need to update your computer every time it gives you an update, what if somebody like me says, I don't remember the last time I even did that? Is there a way you can even check on that?
Sure. So depending on what you're using, if you're on a Windows computer, you simply click on your start button and type Windows updates. And then the first result will be check for Windows updates, open that up and say check for updates. And then it'll go through and do its job. Windows has come a long way in kind of helping to force that. But a lot of times people don't have that on. They're not getting the updates, for one reason or the other. And you kind of have to push that through. We automate that for our clients to where we're constantly tracking that and pushing those updates for them so they don't have to worry about it. But and that's just one part of it. So your operating system is one, and I should say, and if you're on a Mac, same deal. You click on the Apple, go to about this Mac software updates and run it, and always keep that up. Or go into your settings and you'll see it. It's pretty straightforward. But you want to keep that up to date. You also have to do it with your Office products. You got to do it with all your third-party stuff. So if you're using Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader, you've got to have those updated. So really, you want all of your software to be updated. And I know that becomes that's like really your Google Chrome, that's got to be updated. That's actually a really big one. So Google Chrome is the most popular browser on the internet. And anything that is the lead, and has the most of users, is going to be the most targeted because, well, it's a target rich environment, right? Best bang for your buck, better odds of getting somebody with that versus using some obscure browser. So Chrome, being the leader, is constantly being poked full of holes. So any little thing, so anytime there's an update for Chrome, I've noticed people will sit there and they won't click the update. Chrome will say, "Hey, there's a new one," and just push this button to update, and people won't push the button right in their browser. But you got to do that. So again, that's part of where the managed IT services comes in. We just manage all of that for a client to keep them there. But for the users that don't have anybody managing their IT, taking that time to update is really important.
So, what are some other good cyber hygiene habits? Is antivirus enough? Are we fine with that?
So antivirus is a fun one because depending on how old you are, you and I both remember back when viruses came out, and there was a lot of talk about you've got to have antivirus. Okay, computers didn't have antivirus, and then suddenly it became something everybody's got to have, right? So the Nortons and the McAfees, they came around, and great, they could solve this. Now, the thing you got to know about a virus is only a virus because it can self-replicate. That's the only thing that defines it. Just like a virus in biology, right? Its trick is that it can self-replicate. So one cell gets in there and it becomes 2 and 3, and so it's really aptly named in that for a computer, once you get infected, that virus can then go and infect other computers on your network, right? Well, that's bad depending on what it does. Okay, so why do we care? Well, currently we don't really care about antivirus because it's kind of like polio, to take that biology analogy a little further. As long as you've got some antivirus, because we've kind of cured it. We've got the cure for viruses, that little one-trick pony, of self-replicating. We've cured it. We can identify it super quickly, very easily. That's cured. So then the question becomes, well, okay, if viruses aren't the issue, and I've been told for decades that virus is the issue, that's what I want to avoid. What is the issue, right? Well, the real issue is malware. Malware is a much larger category, and viruses would be considered a small subset of malware, right? Being bad software, right? So malware is anything that isn't good for your computer. It was written with nefarious intent to do harm or steal information. So malware is the thing that you want to combat. Now, while with viruses, every certified antivirus protects you from 100% of the known viruses within anywhere from minutes to hours of the discovery of a new virus. So not a big deal, right? Got to have it as part of your immune system, right? But malware, we don't have any one product that can accurately identify and protect you from 100% of the known malware. And we know that there's tons of malware that that hasn't been identified yet. So malware becomes the real issue. And part of that malware is ransomware. Now, the reason it all becomes so tricky is because it's not just self-replicating. It uses any of a number of vulnerabilities that it might find in, like we discussed with your operating system or your browser. And once it gets in there, the real problem is that anything that you can do on your computer, so can any software that got in there. So, for instance, if you went out onto the web and you went to a perfectly legitimate website, and interesting note, it used to be that porn was the industry where it was like, oh, you went to a porn site, now there's all these pop-ups and they're all, embarrassing pop-ups. You don't want that. And it's right. And so what happened was the porn industry found out very early on that is bad for business. So they spent a ton of money. Now, the funny part is perhaps the most secure industry on the internet is the porn industry. And in stark contrast, the most vulnerable are your small churches. So your local church website is a breeding ground for it, which is ridiculous. But it's because they get set up by like a somebody who goes to the church. It was done for free. It's never updated, so it's just a sitting duck, right? And all these people go to it all the time for information. So you can go to a legitimate website, whether it's your church or Yahoo, whatever, and whether it's an infected ad that sneaks through on Yahoo or MSN or something like that, or it's an infected site. What happens is your browser goes there, you click on it, or you don't even click on it. It displays that page. And in part of that code of loading the page is to download this thing and run this particular bad code. Okay. As soon as that happens, you are now infected. You didn't even realize it happened. It all happened without you doing a thing other than going to a perfectly legitimate site. And anything that you can do on your computer, when you open up the browser, so can your browser. So if you can delete files, if you can move stuff, if you can erase things, so can this bad code that you just. So that's where you've really got to be careful, and honestly, there's nothing that a normal person can do about that. They went to a legitimate site and now they're infected, and your antivirus can't stop that infection because it's not a self-replicating code. So antivirus is like, yep, you're not self-replicating, so you're good. Well, it's far from good. It's just not self-replicating. And so that comes the trick.
So given that, what can we do? What kind of security measures can we take?
Yeah. So we actually do this really cool thing called application ring fencing. So I mentioned that your browser can do anything that you can do on your computer. So what we do is we say, hey, look, browser, you can browse pages and you can download files when I say to download it, but that's it. You can't open those files. You can't run crazy code. You can't access my network shares. You can't access the registry. So we say you can do exactly what we want you to do, that one job and that, or two jobs, whatever it is, very specifically. So then when it tries to do something else, it stops automatically. So in that particular example, if with application ring fencing, you go to an infected site, it downloads some code. Oh, I can't run code. So it simply doesn't run. And so we do that with absolutely everything on the computer. And this way you're protected. So even if the nice part is that there was a big problem with a place called SolarWinds. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but SolarWinds, they produce this, they have this software that's used in a lot of large organizations and governments, and it helps monitor networks and do stuff like that. Well, the hackers got in at the source. They hacked SolarWinds, the company. They infected the software before, so when the update went out, so too did the bad code. So these guys got access to all kinds of government networks and large organization networks, just because, right? Because it was in the code of this. So the cool thing about application ring fencing is that had they been using this particular system, then even though that software was infected, it wouldn't have been allowed to do what it did. And it's a little tricky when you've got software that's, managing networks. Like, well, how do you stop that? Well, because the code that it tried to run, that it did run, it wasn't allowed, it wouldn't have been allowed to do it. So it had to go out to the bad guy's website, the server, download this code, because that's what it did in the SolarWinds. It said, hey, look, come out to our site, grab this code, and we'll update it as we figure stuff out, and then run this code. Cool. So really, they just needed one little line, two little lines, it turned out. And so it was easy to put it in the software, easy for people not to even notice. Great. Well, application ring fencing would have stopped that. So when we do this for the little guy, I mean, it's just great. You've got that, all kinds of great protection there. Yeah. So antivirus isn't enough, can't really do it. But when you start implementing things like application ring fencing, that's where you really start getting very secure.
So we've covered a lot today in a fairly short period of time. What would you say, as we kind of wrap things up here, what would you say are maybe for people who are just kind of, this is opening their eyes, what would you say are the primary takeaways that people should have for some of the things we talked about regarding the dark web and cybersecurity?
Sure. If honestly, it comes down to if you can put on multi-factor authentication on all of your accounts, all of them, bank, email, everything. Even if you don't end up changing your password, if you've got that multi-factor authentication on there, that gives you that second layer. Ideally, change all your passwords to something new on occasion. I know it's difficult. If you got a password manager, it's best, but that's a tough fight to win. So change your passwords, use multi-factor authentication, and keep everything up to date. If you do those few things, and it's tough when it's like your router and your firewall. Nobody's got time for that because everybody's busy. Even if you pay somebody just to keep your stuff updated, you are way ahead of where you are when you're not doing that stuff. So you go from sitting duck to a better protected duck, and that's an incredibly affordable solution. So if you don't have somebody do that, get somebody to do that basic. Just give me the basic updates. I don't need the Fort Knox security, and just at least get that basic stuff covered, and you're going to be doing a whole lot better than you are without it.
Okay. Hey, sounds good. Man, it's been great to talk to you today. Thanks so much for having me here. It's been very informative and very helpful.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chad.
So long, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.